morning and welcome to BronxTalk. Over this past summer, the Bronx Community Foundation began a process aimed towards creating a so-called blueprint for the Bronx. They put together community engagement sessions with 18 different organizations. We're going to tell you what those are, inviting more than 1,000 Bronxites to share their vision of who we are in the Bronx and what the Bronx can and should be. Tonight, we'll review those sessions, help them lay the groundwork for what should be a major identity uplift for the 1.4 million people who call the borough of the Bronx home. So let's just get to it. Please join me in welcoming the former New York City's chancellor, who is now the president and CEO of the Bronx Community Foundation. So nice to have Dr. Meisha Porter back on the show.
It is so good to be here with you, Gary.
Thank you so much. And from SAPNA, an organization that advocates for South Asian immigrant women and one of the organizations that did participate in the project. The executive director is Diya Basu-Sen. Nice to have you with us, Ms. Basu-Sen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Porter, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Why'd you do it? What did you do? What was the objective?
Well, first of all, when I took this position with the foundation, I said the first thing we wanted to do was talk to Bronxites, right? And that's why we did it, because we made a commitment to do that. But you know, like so many of us Bronxites, that we know a Bronx that the world doesn't know, and so it's really important that we reshape the narrative and retell the Bronx tale, the one that we know.
I tell people this is like undiscovered territory.
Absolutely,
and I know you know it. And
yes.
We've been here all these years, and of course, BronxNet is now 30. Nobody knows we even have these conversations.
Yep.
Well, what did you want to hear, or what did you expect to hear? I mean, talking to people is one thing, but what did you expect to hear?
Well, we focused on a few key issue areas: housing, food, economic security, education, and we wanted to hear what was important to people, what were at the top of folks' mind. And we wanted to use what we heard from them to begin to think about, one, how do we create a blueprint forward for the Bronx? How do we create a pathway forward? And how do we inform those around us in legislation and in power, like what Bronxites are saying are important and matter and what Bronxites want? And so that's what we really wanted to hear. We wanted to make sure that we were building a foundation, an organization that was bringing new investment to the borough, and that investment would be directed by the voices of Bronxites.
You know, we know who we have a borough president, Vanessa Gibson, and there is a elected structure. I guess the idea here is to intercede in some of those conversations with, I'm just guessing now, with data from people who say, this is what you ought to do.
And actually, it's to partner, right? The Bronx Borough President is a huge champion and friend to the foundation. We see our elected partners as partners. And, you know, they have a lot of work to do legislating around this borough. And we had the time to say, you know what, let us bring you the voices of what community members are saying. And so we're looking forward to engaging electeds as a part of this conversation and what we're hearing, so that they can use what they hear to inform their work across this borough.
I'm smiling because usually they're the first ones in. In this case, they're not going to be the first ones in. Last question before we bring Ms. Basu-Sen into the conversation. Organizations. So you did it through organizations. We were just talking beforehand about the importance of all the community centers and all that. Those are the people who did it. Why did you select that avenue to do it?
You know, I learned when I was chancellor of New York City, and even before that, when I was executive superintendent of the Bronx, that our nonprofit partners are on the ground in so many important ways. And they knew a lot of information that we didn't know at the school level. And were helping us support families in the hardest times in our city. And so those are the same folks who our residents go to for resources and support. And so it wasn't our conversation to lead alone. It was our conversation to lead in partnership.
You know, what you say is so true, and especially during the darkest times, during the pandemic, it was the community centers that did food insecurity and did all those kinds of things. And what I hear from community center directors all the time is, well, they're not getting this in school, so we've got to provide the arts or the music or the athletics or whatever it is. Okay, let's bring Ms. Basu-Sen in. People don't know SAPNA. I was told that SAPNA means dream in Bangla and Hindi. Tell me a little bit about SAPNA, and then we'll get into this conversation that we just started.
Sure. So we're a community-based organization, and we're based in Parkchester, so in the Bronx. And our work centers on addressing health inequities, fostering women's empowerment, and building community power. So we offer holistic social services, and we really focus on bringing linguistically accessible and culturally attuned programming to our community.
You know, the word immigrant in the Bronx is, you know, for some places, maybe it's like other people, but in the Bronx, it's us, it's our people. We were doing some of the math. We thought more than 80,000 South Asians in the borough of the Bronx.
Asians, I should say.
Okay, Asians, fine. What defines, before we even get into the community engagement, what defines the biggest issues for them? Maybe some of the things you heard at the community engagement, but you know, you talk about women empowerment, nice catchwords. What do you do? How do you empower people? How do you develop their lives so that they can, I hate to use the word, but integrate into American society, or just be the Americans that they are?
Absolutely. I think when you think about empowerment, it's really just having information and resources. Right? There's so much that exists in our city. There's so much that we also offer people. But if you don't know, then you're never going to access that help. So it's financial help, it's free education, it could be domestic violence survivors services, it could be housing. But what happens is, as new immigrants, right, they're not part of the systems that exist in our city. And so they don't receive information kind of in the ways that the city is doing the outreach. So they rely on organizations like SAPNA to be that bridge, to bring that information, to make sure that they know what their rights are, what the resources are, and to help them link to that.
Is it a struggle right now? Sorry, I got to ask the tough question, the direct questions. It's not necessarily tough. You know the answer. But is it difficult right now? Is it more difficult? Let's say now you said the organization is 15 years old than it was 15 years ago. Or, goodness, I'd love to think that we've developed, we've made some advancements in 15 years. What's it like? I mean, just from your perspective.
Sure. I mean, I think community-based organizations, nonprofits, it's always a struggle, right? We don't have enough resources. We never have had enough resources.
Unfortunately, I knew you were going to say that.
And so
it drives me crazy.
You'll never really see a dollar that works harder than something that's at a nonprofit, right? The work that we're able to do with so little. And so I think that's the ultimate struggle, right? Not having the resources that we need.
Do you see results? Like the kind of results that, I mean, I realize everything can't all of a sudden you turn people's lives around, but do you see lives that are changed, families that are stronger than they used to be, those kinds of things?
Absolutely. I think there's so many different people we work with in different ways, right? During the pandemic, you were talking about food insecurity. Every week, we provided 300 families with groceries every single week. And these are families that didn't get SNAP. These are families that didn't have access to other resources. So it was literally a matter of having food or not having food.
Right. And coming from other places, they don't instinctively know who to call or where to turn, et cetera, et cetera. So what about this community engagement? I'm presuming that you thought this was a really good idea.
Yeah, so we were really excited to partner on this. And I think we also appreciated that it was called a partnership. So it was very much something that we worked on together and put together for our community and centering our community. I think, right, so often I'm invited, right, to places to talk, to roundtables, to things like that. But I don't want my voice to kind of erase the voices of our community, right? My job is to amplify those voices. Right. And so it was really nice that in this opportunity, it was actually hearing not just my voice, but the voices of the people.
We have a list. If a producer, Rebecca, could put up the list. Here's the list of the organizations. We talked about SAPNA, Eastside House Settlement. Everybody can see it. Bronx Community Justice Center, WETCO, FIPS, NWBCCC, Canna Bronx, DreamYard, RAIN. People know these organizations like they know their own names in the Bronx. Center for Community Engaged Learning, Mary Mitchell Youth and Family Center, the Knowledge House, which was done at BronxNet, I understand, our new studios in the South Bronx. Riverdale Y, SUNY EOC. What was the process? So you come in there, tell us what you think. Bronxites aren't shy. They'll tell you what they think, but you need to really do it in some organized fashion.
So first of all, it started with, and there are a few other organizations, New Settlement, I think we said FIPS already, that were, YMPJ. There were organizations that were a part of planning for the engagement sessions, right? And so before we even get to a session, we sat with nonprofit partners who were co-designers to say, work with us. Hester Street was a lead partner with us. Let's design what we want to have come out of these sessions. And there were two things that were important to us. One, that we came into a space where people could see the Bronx in very aspirational ways. And two,
as opposed to the dead end that gets projected all the time.
Absolutely. And two, that, we centered community and joy as a part of the process. And those are two things that people don't often center when they start conversations.
Explain that. How do you mean we centered community and joy? That's fascinating.
Well, to your point, right? Like, we watch the news every day. And the borough president talks about this all the time. When she's interviewed, people want to focus on negative and deficit approaches to what happens in the Bronx. I live in the Bronx. I've raised my family in the Bronx. That's not I've led schools in the Bronx. That's not my experience. I've experienced the greatest joy and seen so many amazing successes come out of this great borough. And so we wanted to make sure that people knew when they came into space with us, it was to celebrate that. Right. And we acknowledge that there are some things that we need to fix in our community and in our borough.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Right. But we wanted people to know that there are things to also celebrate.
So they were writing things.
They were writing things. They were dream boarding the Bronx. We had young children, teenagers. Our oldest participant was 102 years old.
Wow.
And we had glue sticks and colored markers and just people dreaming and pulling up pictures and identifying focus areas for their ideal Bronx.
Wow.
And it was super powerful. One example, in one session, one of our participants said, you know what we need? We need more benches. Simple solution, right?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know, he or she was right.
Yes. And she said, because benches build community. And for seniors, right, like we need a place to rest. Yep. And so there are simple things that we
to congregate.
Or to congregate. And congregate is a powerful, beautiful way that you build community. And what she did in her session was she went around to everybody's board and was like, don't forget to put a bench on your board. The benches matter. They build community. They build conversation. Wow. And so
that's a fascinating innovation.
Yes.
That can only come from people who are living.
And we think that so many solutions are huge and cost cajillions of dollars. And there are solutions that are quite simple.
Well, that might be simple, but of course somebody's got to pay for it.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Ms. Basu-Sen, now what about for your folks? And what was it like for them? And what did you hear from them that maybe it wasn't benches, maybe it was something else that you were like, oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people in our community really enjoyed these sessions. We started out thinking we were going to do this conversation with 50 community members, and then people kept telling us, well, my cousin wants to do it, my friend wants to do it. Like, they really enjoyed it. So we ended up talking to over 100 Bengali community members in the Parkchester area. And one of the things we heard most was housing. We actually ran out of the stickers for the housing and the pictures for the housing.
That was going to be the case.
And it was not just affordable housing, it was also safe housing. Right, that doesn't have lead paint, that doesn't have, insect infestations.
Security issues, urine on
accessibility,
the staircase.
Right?
Yes.
Staircases, elevators for older folks.
Stairway doors that close so we don't put everybody at risk. And was there any surprises? Anything that you heard that you said, oh, like benches? I'm not going to get past that. But was there anything that was surprising? Because if you tell me housing and food insecurity and security, I understand that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was really the basics of being able to live your life and sustain. But I think we also did hear a lot about that community space. They didn't specify benches, but a lot of people did mention wanting space for community, particularly senior citizens, women who are maybe at home and there's not really a public space, especially an indoor public space, where people can go other than a library.
I'll share a personal story. I live in a building. I live on an upper floor. And there are even and odd elevators. And so, of course, I'm on the upper floor. So I see everybody, I'm on an even floor, everybody who comes to the even. There's a whole half a building.
Yeah.
And I almost never, I see them and I'm like, Oh, you live here? I have no idea. That's the kind of fragmentation that we live with. And what this was about putting people together.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, just to this point, was the other thing I think people talked about was green spaces and access to green spaces. And, you know, the Bronx is actually the greenest borough, but we don't have access in key places to green spaces.
It's known as the Borough of Parks. It's known as the Borough of Universities. You know, and we're still fighting over education. We did win the cricket battle. Some people might already know that.
Yes.
You, fortunately or unfortunately, have been through government and know how the structures work. So now that you will have a plan, and by the way, that's going to be unveiled October 24th.
The beginning of it is going to be unveiled on October 24th.
So you will have a plan, but you know, there's legislation, there's funding for benches, and all the other things that certainly housing becomes a big thing. There's development and people concerned about gentrification. I mean, we deal with these all the time. How do we turn some of these ideas into reality, given the infrastructures, the political infrastructures, and other infrastructures?
I think there are multiple ways. One is that part of the reason we had these conversations is we want to think about what this borough needs the foundation to do and be, and what kind of investments we need to bring into this borough. And so one of the things we've learned in our own work at the foundation, we've been kind of following philanthropic dollars around the city to see how much land is actually in this borough.
Who's spending and where they're spending.
Right. And what we learned is that the Bronx gets a lot of government dollars, but not a lot of private philanthropic dollars that I think could supply and solve some of these issues that came up easier. And so that has helped to direct us in thinking about when we hear about pensions, when we hear about food, right? And to your point, housing and food were the biggest issues.
Not a surprise.
Right? Not a surprise. And so how do we as a foundation leverage our position to bring in new resources to support the things that came out of these engagement? And yes, our elected partners, our government partners are a part of it and need to continue to be a part of it. But we also want to go after all of those really powerful and also invested, prideful Bronxites. Generous, most importantly, thank you. Bronxites who are trying to figure out, like, how do I give back to this great borough? We can.
Ms. Basu-Sen, I have to ask you about what is really at the core of the borough of the Bronx, and that is ethnicity. You know, so you deal with, you know, people who come from other parts of the world. They're not familiar with who we are. They want to establish their culture here. I guess, number one, what is the struggle for them? And number two, can these sessions help embolden our ethnic communities, you know, not only the obvious ones, but ones that maybe get overlooked? To me, that's one of the most significant aspects of your participation in this dialogue and in that project.
Yeah, I think when Dr. Porter was saying Bronxites, right, like the South Asian population, the Asian population in the Bronx is growing a lot and has grown a lot over the years. And I think as immigrants, right, it's a matter of being able to hold on and celebrate your culture and your heritage and your traditions, while also kind of taking on new traditions that you learn in the Bronx, right, or in New York City. So at SAPNA, right, we celebrate Eid, and we do Diwali, we do things like that, but we also do like a Christmas party. And so it's really just melding the different
Bronx.
parts.
I love it. Of course.
Yeah, right?
Course. Like, and people embrace that.
Yeah.
Because they respect each other. And I see it every day in the Bronx. I mean, you know, you go in the deli and people aren't saying, are you black, are you white, are you Asian, you know, we're here. And to me, it's one of the things that inspires me about doing the work that I do and being here in the borough. From a cultural standpoint, do you feel that they're getting what they need to be getting? They have the religious infrastructures that they need, or is it still kind of a work in progress?
I think it's definitely a work in progress, and everything's right, always a work in progress. But I think there has been significant strides. I think language access is a piece we've made a lot of kind of strides in. There's still a lot more to be done. But I think kind of one of the main things that I took away from this is that no one said, like, I'd rather live somewhere else, that I don't love the Bronx, I don't love my home, right? Like,
I'm happy to hear that.
They said that I love it here. I love my community. I love that I can go down the street and there's a Bengali grocery store, but there's also other things. But there are certain things, right, that we just need to make our lives better, to bring that joy back.
Well, then you tell my friend Dr. Porter, this is what we need.
Yes.
Put it in your report.
Yes.
So I want to just wrap up the discussion about this, and I have something else I want to ask you in particular. So October 24th, we're going to see something.
You're going to see the beginnings of the framework of what's begun to come out. The full blueprint will be unveiling in January. So we want to invite people in to see what the community has been saying.
And that
first.
will be in a physical space?
That will be it's going to be at the Andrew Friedman home.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, the historic Andrew Friedman home.
Which is vastly underused.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Listen, I have to ask you this. The Bronx Community Foundation has been a leader in the legalization of cannabis and making it available. But there have been so many, it's a roller coaster ride. Oh, that happened. That was good. This is not good. But the latest news that the courts are opening it up to corporate interest seems to me contradicts the justification for the entire project, which was in essence, to find a word to define it, reparations for people who had been abused. Now, if you open it up to corporations, it's like, selling Budweiser beer.
Yeah. No, I mean, we got involved in this, this space for all of those reasons. We thought it was so important. The social justice applicants, we thought the legislation that was created was so critical and important for Bronxites who've been criminally justice impacted in so many ways by the cannabis, by the war on drugs. And so we are deeply disappointed in the moves that are being made, and really feel that there needs to be a slowdown on the, large corporations, because we only have 23 social justice applicants that are open in this city. And that was not the commitment.
City of 8 million people.
Exactly. That wasn't the commitment that was made. And we see this as a real generational wealth building opportunity.
Is there going to be a lawsuit? Because when the courts say it, you're going to have to deal with it.
We're working closely with our partners. Canna Bronx is a huge partner for us in this work. And, we want to build a coalition of the coalitions. We think people aren't hearing the voices of the applicants who've made significant financial investments in being able to open a business and should have the opportunity to do so first.
We just showed some photographs of, you did some kind of workshops and things like that. And those worked out well and people understood. But now it's almost like back to the drawing board. One other question about this, which has to be asked, and we did a show on this, is the illegal shops, which are everywhere. It's like, and people can relate it to, let's say, liquor sales. If you had unlicensed people selling liquor, you'd have to deal with it because they're competing with legitimate businesses. I believe there was recently a sting by the sheriff's office that took down some, but they're everywhere. I don't even know how to ask the question.
I think we need to solve the illegal shops problem before we open up to big business, because we are not allowing the people we made initial commitments to get in the business in the way that they should. And so I think that we are jumping steps before we actually solve the problem.
Gee, it just occurred to me maybe to put the two subjects together. Did the cannabis thing come up in the?
It did.
It did. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Bronxites know everything.
No, I mean, it came up as when people talked about green spaces as potential growers. It came up as an industry to bring resources into the borough. It came up a lot because people are aware of the legal opportunities and the illicit market that is happening. Wow. And so folks want to really get what was promised to them. The foundation is here to continue to be a partner to ensure that happens. We're not going in the cannabis business, but we are in the business of equity and social justice.
I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe you got to find the right judge. I mean, that is what's done very often. All right, let's just get back to our first subject. Ms. Basu-Sen, you have an event coming up. We want to help you promote that event. And let's talk about what that is.
Sure. So it's actually our 15th anniversary this year. So we're really excited. And we are having a celebration of that, of our community, with a cultural show and food. It'll be next week on September 28th.
On September 28th down in Union Square. The people can participate. If other people, I mean, we've put up some of the contact info, but other people who say, hey, I want to know more about the organization, they can get to you, or they go online. What do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. They can access us through our website, sapnanyc.org. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, everything, SAPNA And we're happy to talk to anyone who wants to be a part of our work, who needs help, who wants to partner. It's,
if you're a Bronxite, it's hard not to be enthusiastic about what you do, and so many other organizations.
Yeah.
I mean, you got an opportunity to be here, but there's much more going on. What else about the Bronx Community Foundation do we need to know?
So you talked about October 24th. We're going to be beginning to unveil parts of the blueprint,
Right.
But we also would love for folks to go onto www.thebronx.org. We got The Bronx, you can give, you can find ways to volunteer, and just become a part of the movement of building a philanthropic community in this borough.
I have to ask you one final question.
Yes.
We'll squeeze it in. What's it been like for you to do this, as opposed to all your work in the schools and,
Yeah.
of course, as a chancellor?
Yep.
For you, what's it been like?
It's been wonderful. I'm
Really?
a Bronxite. I'm from the Bronx. I was born in Queens, so people like to remind me of that, and I love that. But my heart and my growth and my leadership has all happened in this great borough. And for me, this is the bringing together of all of those worlds. School is the center of community, and everything that happens around it makes it better.
The fact that you're listening to what we have to say is
Yes.
a beautiful thing. Well, Dr. Meisha Porter, thank you, and thank my friends at the Bronx Community
I will
Foundation.
do so.
Nice to meet Diya Basu-Sen.
Nice to meet you,
Congratulations for all the great work you're doing, and we hope health and prosperity for all the people who work with you. And we appreciate you joining us. We also thank our producers, Rebecca Hemick, our director, William Guzman, the cast of thousands who work with us here in the studio, and of course to you, people of the Bronx. Next week, we'll talk with the director of the Bronx EDC, Economic Development Corporation. That should be interesting. We're going to be talking about development in the Bronx. So if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, we'll be here next week.